Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Quarantine Collections. My name is Travis Gilbert. I'm the Educator and Collections Coordinator here at the Old Baldy Foundation. And y'all are going to have to bear with me this morning because my allergies and my hair are going wild. It is a beautiful day here on Bald Head Island. The pollen is so thick, everything has a green coat this morning, and that means that my allergies are just having a field day, so I apologize if I have to pause for a moment. But I'm really excited for this morning's topic. I have pulled out something that you all are just going to eat up. It is the riding boots from a gentleman named Jack Murphy, who served on Bald Head Island in the Coast Guard during World War II. So, Jack Murphy, if you recall, maybe you joined us with Jane Oakley's interview last week. Jane Oakley was the first executive director of the Old Baldy Foundation, and of course that means she was the tour guide for the Bald Head Island Historic Tour. And Jack Murphy just got off the ferry one day and said, "I'm here for the tour, and I served here during World War II when we had the mounted horse patrols." And they went on a tour. I'll post a picture of Jane and Jack in a little bit in the comments. It's kind of funny. Jack was like over 6 feet tall, and Jane is kind of my size. So it's funny to see the picture, just the juxtaposition between her stature and his enormous height. And they groomed a relationship, and eventually Jack Murphy donated to the Old Baldy Foundation the riding boots that served him here on Bald Head Island during World War II. So it's a really exciting topic this morning. I'm so glad that you can join us out there to delve into this World War II history on Bald Head Island with one of our more colorful characters, Jack Murphy. As always, if you're listening out there, give us a shout out in the comments. Let us know where you're listening from. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what your connection to Bald Head Island is. And if you have any questions or would like us to elaborate on something, give us a shout out in those comments and we will get back to you. I pulled out all kinds of pictures too to kind of illustrate what is going on in World War II on Bald Head Island. Lauren, I'm enjoying these so much, Travis. Well, Lauren, we're enjoying bringing these to you. It's keeping me sane during these crazy times that we're living in. If I can't talk about history at least a few hours a day, I'm going to go nuts. So this is just as much fun for me as it is for you. And thank you for joining us, Lauren. So, the Coast Guard Cavalry. What were the mounted horse patrols that served on barrier islands all up and down the eastern seaboard and Gulf of Mexico during World War II? Well, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the United States declared war on the Axis powers, Germany and Japan and Italy, there was a very strong belief that our coastline was just open and ripe for attack. That is because Germany had U-boat submarines. Now, this technology had predated World War II. It was around during World War I as well and employed on the eastern seaboard. But these U-boat submarines from Germany were able to cross the Atlantic en masse, and they hung off of North Carolina's coastline and other coastlines and other states up and down the eastern seaboard and Gulf of Mexico. And they were seeking to torpedo Allied shipping, oil tankers, cargo ships, just as the Southern Confederacy was blockaded during the Civil War to prevent any goods from leaving the South and any goods from entering the South. And you may know that the Bald Head Island and the Cape Fear River had a major role in that part of American history. This was happening to England during World War II. England was being blockaded. England could not produce the war materials, the goods that she needed to survive and prevail during World War II. They had to be imported from America. So Hitler and the German powers thought, well, if we can torpedo any ships leaving America full of oil, full of goods and supplies bound for England, we can starve England into submission. And North Carolina's coastline was a prime area to torpedo these Allied warships, Allied cargo ships and oil tankers, because of our three capes, Cape Hatteras, Cape Lookout, and Cape Fear. Extending off of each of those capes are shoals, or these semi-submerged sandbars that act as a giant barrier sticking from the coast out into the Atlantic Ocean. Diamond shoals at Cape Hatteras, Lookout at Cape Lookout, and of course frying pan shoals here at Cape Fear. Those capes and the end of those shoals are called choke points, meaning that it was easy to predict where these oil tankers and where these cargo ships would be traveling because they all needed to circumnavigate each of the capes and their shoals. And of course, these cargo ships and oil tankers are not going to go any further offshore than what they need to. They're going to go to the end of the shoals and then circumnavigate and go out and around. So it was very easy to predict where these oil tankers and cargo ships would be traveling for these enemy U-boat submarines offshore, lurking in the Atlantic Ocean. That's why they're called choke points or funnels. Think of it as a funnel. Emmeline, 10 and 2, highlights of our day. Dan and Emmeline, hey, good morning to you both up there in Charlottesville. I appreciate you all tuning in. You all have been so very kind to us. Pardon me, everybody. I said my allergies are really just going through the roof up here today. So in order to retaliate, well, let's recall there's upwards, some historians have some kind of a variety of numbers. I think the most I've seen is 72. That is a historian, David Stick, who wrote a book about Bald Head Island in the 1980s. He's one of the most famous coastal Carolina historians. Think of Graveyard of the Atlantic, Roanoke Island, the history of Dare County, etc. Also, Kevin Duffus, he's up there in the high 60s. Of course, Kevin Duffus is kind of a student of David Stick and wrote our most recent book about Bald Head Island. He says there were upwards of 60-some attacks. So high 60s, low 70s. That's how many ships were successfully torpedoed by German U-boats off the North Carolina coastline. And we have a ship called the Nashville and a ship called the John D. Gill, both oil tankers that were torpedoed not far from Cape Fear. So World War II hit very close to home. And what was the United States going to do to retaliate against these German U-boat submarines? Well, they're going to send out men like Jack Murphy in the Coast Guard Cavalry. So Coast Guard stations were reactivated, were beefed up following 1942 in order to provide these mounted horse patrols. They gave the Coast Guardsmen a dog and a horse, and the dog, horse, and coastie went up and down the beaches of these barrier islands all across the eastern seaboard and Gulf of Mexico. The dog is sniffing for Germans. The coastie is looking for Germans, and when a German is sighted, they're going to radio to wherever there's an air base in their geographical region, and hopefully that airplane can go out there and bomb this German U-boat offshore. Meanwhile, they're also not just looking for German U-boats, they are also looking for any kind of suspicious activity. You see, in June of 1942, 2 Nazi U-boats actually landed Germans from a U-boat onto the shores of New York. So U-boat 202. So although for historians that's the only successful landing of Nazis in America from these U-boats offshore during the entire history of World War II, there are all kinds of legends that there were more. Even one here in southeastern North Carolina, you got a legend that somehow this U-boat had attacked a chemical plant up in Curie Beach, and also that Germans were found with a movie ticket stub from Southport in their pocket. Again, kind of legends. Take it for what it is. I think it's highly unlikely. But still, you can imagine the Coast Guard, they wanted to prevent any other landings after that happened from June of 1942. So these mounted horse patrols, the Coast Guard cavalry, not only are they riding on these horses up and down the beaches looking offshore for German U-boats, they're also on shore looking for any suspicious activity. Some gear, supplies, or boats that are left on shore. Men or strangers on these beaches. They can't really explain where they came from or why they're there. Just kind of looking for any suspicious activity. So here on Bald Head Island, good morning, Mackie. Highlight of my day. Thanks, Travis. Well, thank you, Mackie. It's good to see from you or hear from you this morning. So, of course, in Bald Head Island, it's a very important geographical location to operate these mounted horse patrols. In the late 30s, our Coast Guard station on this island was deactivated, so it had to be reactivated. It was along South Beach. Today, it's in the area of Sea Lavender Court off South Bald Head WWII. So why was Bald Head Island very important? Well, Wilmington, just upstream along the Cape Fear River, was a major shipbuilding area for the Allied powers. The North Carolina Shipbuilding Corporation built 200-some Liberty ships or cargo ships for the war effort. So you wanted to protect that major piece of infrastructure, and that is prime pickings for a U-boat should they attempt to attack inland, of course, which never happened, but it was a lot of what-ifs during World War II. So Jack Murphy, yeah, let me show you some pictures. Here is Jack Murphy. His horse was named King. There you see him and King riding on our beaches. Here's another picture of King and Jack Murphy. So these mounted horse patrolsmen, they were trained at a base in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. It's called the Mounted Beach Patrol and Dog Training Center. So you can see King was Jack Murphy's horse, and their dogs here were named Wolf and Gypsy. Wolf and Gypsy served here on Bald Head Island with the Coasties. The horse barn was located up on Bluff Island. There are no longer any remains of that facility up there on Bluff Island, but that was one of the horse barns. The other horse barn, or the other stable, was the repurposed boathouse at that Coast Guard station that was built in 1915 along South Beach. That is the only facility of that Coast Guard station that has survived the test of time. The boathouse is now a private residence there on Sea Lavender Court. Originally, it was used to store the boats from the Coast Guard, but later during World War II, it's repurposed into being a stable to keep all these horses. Here is the flock of sheep. There were sheep on the island. There's Jack Murphy having fun with a sheep or a billy goat. I think that's what it looks like. It might be a little mislabeled. Looks like a billy goat to me. These men were paid $21 a month to serve here on Bald Head Island and other barrier islands. But of course, have several pictures of my dad on horses during World War II. Patty, this is Jack Murphy's collection. I should have pulled out your father's collection. I promised that we're going to get to him as well. Watching from, hey, good morning, Kevin. It's good to hear from you. I hope I got your email. I cannot believe that it is winter where you are, because my allergies are through the roof and everything is blooming on Bald Head. So I'm hoping that winter is long gone for us down here. Then Mackie, let's see what Mackie is saying here. I find it mind-boggling that the dogs could sniff those U-boats that far from shore. I'm misunderstanding what you said. Yeah, Mackie, the dogs are used to sniff if they land. They had this successful landing of Germans in New York in June of 1942. and they were constantly concerned that there would be other landings. That's where a lot of this legend comes from, of the chemical plant being attacked in Curie Beach. Again, my favorite is that there were Germans that landed in, I think, New York or New Jersey, the legend says, but they had movie ticket stubs from Southport, North Carolina in their pocket. The dogs aren't sniffing for U-boats offshore, and that would be impossible. They're sniffing to make sure that there wasn't a landing 3 hours ago, and they come across it and they see all this gear on the beach. Well, the dog could point them in the right direction of where these Germans or where these enemies had gone. But of course, that never happened on Bald Head Island. It was a game of what if rather than what was. So Patty, back to Patty. I promise there's one of my favorite pictures in our collections is a picture of your dad on top of old Baldy doing a semaphore signal. You see the back of him, and he's doing a semaphore signal in his uniform. And then there are men at the old pier on a Coast Guard bateau, and they're down there signaling back to him. It's one of my favorite photographs in our collections, and I will pull that out. I know I sent you a message. Maybe we can get you on the phone and talk about your father's memories here on Bald Head Island. So here's another poker. Was another horse. And you can see, I will pull out in our collections, we have a hat that's very similar to here. Now, I've not been able to prove that hat was one that Jack Murphy wore, but there was a helmet, I should not say just a hat, a helmet that we have in our collections that's definitely from this era. You have Jim Green here and Jack Murphy on King, riding in the surf. So you can see here, because there wasn't much danger, there wasn't much landing, the men really just kind of had a field day, or were just having fun out here. Now, this is way before the era of the Conservancy. Side note, Patty, my mom danced for the USO, and that's how they met. Patty, I live home for me in downtown Wilmington is not very far from the Hannah Block building, the old USO, and then I helped out at Thalian Hall, and the back of that was the old Woodrow Wilson hut, they called it, which was, some historians argue up there that it was the first USO in America. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but certainly it was an early one. I'd love to know, Patty, which USO was it? Was it and then there was a segregated USO that I think it was called the Nixon, or no, it was on Nixon Street up on the north side of Wilmington. That was this segregated one. But USO, Patty, let us know. I'd love to know that. I've heard so many different stories of men meeting in Wilmington. And anybody out there, if you want to know more about World War II in Wilmington, Wilbur Jones Jr. has written 2 really wonderfully researched and a beautiful narrative about the story of World War II in Wilmington. One is called A Sentimental Journey, and then the part 2 is called I think The Journey Continues, or The Story Continues. 2 really, really great books. Again, the author Wilbur Jones Jr., and he's been instrumental in Wilmington, working with us to get Wilmington as created as a status of a World War II city. It's taken some congressional action, and we're the first to be designated. That happened just, I don't know, last year. Last year it was. We got that designation. It's the first city in America to get that designation. Of course, we had POW camps as well. So as I say, they're interacting with the sea turtles. Before the Conservancy, you had the Coast Guardsmen, and they had a ball with the sea turtles there. So Dot and Jean Lewis were kind of like the caretakers up there, and they had this facility on Bluff Island, which is the most northern of the barrier islands that comprise this complex here around Smith Island Complex is what we call it. So Gene and Dot, they were living here on Bald Head Island during this era, and that's the facility. So they had, it seems like they had two facilities. They had the Coast Guard station on South Beach. What remains with us today is that boathouse, and then they had this facility as well up there on Bluff Island. And again, there are no remains that I'm aware of left up there. So they had these flimsy barracks. It was heated with kerosene in the winter. They played poker. They loved the guitar. I think I got a picture. There we go. This is this is the facility up on Bluff Island, and this is very. It very much looks like it's the back. I think it's the back of the Coast Guard station on South Beach. It's certainly not the front. The front had a porch. So it might be the back. It doesn't look like the boathouse to me. It looks like the Coast Guard station that was burned down accidentally by a couple seeking refuge in the late 60s. But there you see the crew with their guitar in the back of that Coast Guard station along South Beach. You can see the beach strand in the background there. So it's, I think a very educated guess, it's the back of that station. And of course, they're getting on and off Bald Head Island aboard these bateaus. And at our historic happy hour, if you joined us, we kind of were trying to decide whether the boathouse was completed for the Coast Guard or whether it was completed for the lighthouse. And I showed you what I thought, and we tried to go back in the sources to figure out. And Margaret Swan Hood had these vivid memories of these Coast Guard bateaus, she called them. And there you can see one, and we definitely have examples of much heftier boats. But the point being is they're coming on and off Bald Head Island by floating up into this creek system that is now the Saltwater Marsh Preserve and unloading from a dock there along the saltwater marsh on the northern perimeter or the northern boundary of Bald Head Island. We have several photographs from the State Port pilot that I didn't bring out today. Thought we'd focus on Jack Murphy. But you see the Coast Guardsmen unloading supplies from these boats along that dock. And then there's a recreation shack. They had quite a few games of poker, they said. They really enjoyed poker. Again, this is the one that was up on Bluff Island. And lastly, there's another one of them interacting with the sea turtles. I'm not sure the Conservancy would enjoy anybody doing something like this today, right? So if you're listening out there, give us a shout out in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what your connection is to Bald Head Island. All right, so let's take you over to the riding boots. So there are the riding boots. They used to be on display, but they're in pretty poor shape, so we're working on getting them conserved. We have one piece in our collection right now at a conservator in Raleigh. It's from the Life-Saving Service era. We were working with historians in the United States Life-Saving Service Heritage Association, and when they let us know how valuable this black powder can was used for the Lyle guns during the life-saving era, we thought we need to go get that conserved. So that was number one on the list after the uniform was conserved in late 2018. This is number two on our list. As you can see, they're in pretty poor shape. They need to be conserved. They need to be worked with. They need better mounting. So unfortunately, we took them off display for this year. And we store them in our archival facility until we can get a conservator to work on these, and we will bring them back. They're not in too terrible shape, but they need some work if they're going to survive the test of time. So again, Jack Murphy's riding boots in those pictures. I'm sure he's using or wearing these boots. So we keep these in this box here. It's a archival grade acid-free box. Usually they're covered, they're wrapped up with this tissue paper, which is also acid-free, all archival quality. So when you support public programming here at the Lighthouse, these are the types of materials that we use your resources to purchase. Resources to ensure that future generations have artifacts like this that help tell the story of Bald Head Island. We can lecture all we want, but nothing quite beats having an artifact to help illuminate or illustrate the story that we're trying to tell. So with your generosity and your support, these are the materials that you're helping us purchase in order to ensure that these artifacts are well taken care of, because that's what you take. That's why we serve you. Is what I'm trying to say. Jack Murphy and all of you out there, give us these artifacts because you trust in us to take care of them and preserve them and use them for educational and interpretive purposes. So this is a great example. I'm hoping when the dust settles this fall, we will get these boots to a conservator. And we're very fortunate to live in this area because there are many conservators up in the Greensboro, Raleigh, Durham area that are just in our backyard. So we're very fortunate to have those metropolitan areas just a little drive away up Route 40. And that's where our black powder can is right now. It's a conservator in Raleigh. So very fortunate where we live. All right. My allergies aren't doing too terrible. So I also wanted to share, so remember Jack Murphy just appeared one day when Jane Oakley was the executive director, and that's how we got to acquire those boots. And I promised you I'd show you a picture. There is Jane, and there is Jack. No longer as tan or young or fresh-faced, but there he is in all his, I think I wrote down that what the size he was. Let me see it in my notes here. It was 6'4". 6'4". Kind of crazy. So that is the day that they met and how we acquired these boots. All right, folks. Well, if anybody else has any questions out there, I think that is the content for today. So, of course, the Coast Guard station was deactivated. Jack Murphy went home after the conclusion of World War II, and that was Jack Murphy and his friends represent the last Coast Guardsmen to serve on Bald Head Island. That is the end of a chapter of a very important piece of Bald Head Island's history. And of course, slowly but surely, the cottages, the cistern, the station, the structure on Bluff Island, they're all lost to time. And today, what we use to tell this story is the boathouse on Sea Lavender Court that was kind of adaptively reused into a generator society home, so it's still with us today. Ida from St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, Ida, we're hoping that you're healthy and staying positive out there, Ida. Thank you for joining with us. Make sure I didn't miss any comments. Jan, so thankful you're doing this. Absolutely, my pleasure. Absolutely, Jan. It's keeping me busy and keeping me sane. So Chris and Marissa, good morning to you ladies out there. I'm hoping y'all are well. All right, well, this afternoon we're going to be bringing you out to the field. And then we have a full day tomorrow at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock virtual programming. Then I'm going to take my weekend, Travis weekend, Sunday and Monday, I refuse to work on Mondays. I'm just kidding. That's usually how it works. But my Mondays are precious for me. And we will be back next week with a full list of virtual programming. And I think we have a few things that are up our sleeves for next week that are going to be really exciting. It's going to bring you a perspective that you probably have never seen before of Bald Head Island. So there's some special things in the works for next week. So those of you all that are celebrating holidays this week and this weekend, we hope that you have a blessed holiday. Try to stay positive and try to keep with tradition. I know it's unusual and strange times. Many of you want to go to your synagogue or your church and celebrate there, and unfortunately that's just not the case this time around. But we hope that you can bring some semblance of normalcy to your holiday if you are celebrating this week and this weekend. We hope that you're healthy. We thank all our essential employees out there, our nurses and our doctors and our truck drivers, our grocery store workers, gas attendants, everybody out there that's continuing to work while we all social distance so we can do our part. Just like Jack Murphy in World War II, those times called for unusual circumstances. It called for Americans to pull together and to make sacrifices for the war effort, and that's not too dissimilar to what we're doing right now in communities like St. Louis with Ida, and up there in Charlottesville with Dan and Emmeline, and Marissa up in Leland. It's not too dissimilar to Jack Murphy's days. So on that note, we'll see you this afternoon, everybody. You stay healthy and you stay positive out there. Thanks for joining us.